Vez remembered that Marcella hadn't yet gotten back to him about the customer, and he gave her a call.
Hey, Vez, I know what you're calling about, and the deal has just been finalized. Guess how many credits he practically threw at me to order your Mech?
She smirked at him on his comm screen. Did you manage to get the full 24 million?
Ha! That's chump change. I got a lot more than that.
25? 26?
Nope.
Marcella swiped and brought up an invoice.
Check for yourself.
Vez's eyes widened as he read the numbers. Marcella's customer had ordered his Mech for a whopping 28 million credits. That gave Vez a gross profit of 11 million credits if he delivered his Mech on time and in good condition. His belief in Marcella's abilities had increased, and he started to think the decision to partner with her was the best one he could have ever made. Marcella tapped her fingers on her desk, and Vez quickly focused back on the conversation.
Don't get too excited, buddy. Running a Mech business isn't a casual undertaking. You have to plan properly for your expenses. If you factor in your interest payments, your tax burden, and your capital assets depreciation, you'll see that your net profit is a lot smaller than you originally thought.
Vez's feelings of excitement quickly faded away, and he knew she was right. Well, my taxes should have dropped a little. The planetary government is already processing my application for preferable treatment status. I should be able to get my tax rate reduced to 15%. That was a considerable advantage for Vez. If he had set up his business in Bentheim, he would have had to fork out 35%, and that was with the preferable treatment status.
Your expenses and other bills are lower than most other Mech designers, but don't forget your business is a one-man show. Your scale can't be compared to most small to medium enterprises that have based themselves in Bentheim for years. The industry revolves around a minimum amount of scale production. If you want to improve your Mechs, you need better machines, and that means you have to start saving money from now.
Vez nodded, understanding the importance of what she had said. His 3D printer and assembler were good for a decade, maybe 2 at a push if he stretched things out and installed some upgrades. But eventually, he wanted to go all out and use more capable machines worth billions of credits. I've got so many things to buy. Vez was feeling a little sorry for himself. Earning a couple billion credits was a pipe dream for most people. Even seasoned Mech designers often despaired at the costs their businesses demanded.
In any case, just do your work. I'll be expecting a satisfactory result within 10 days if you want to ship your Mech to the client in time. Will you be able to deliver by the deadline?
Vez nodded with confidence. He had planned to stretch out the fabrication process to 9 days, which was a lengthy time for an average Mech. But it was the first time he would be fabricating for real, and he wanted to slow down and produce each part with meticulous care. I'll have the Mech delivered to the local branch of the MTA within 9 days for inspection. I don't expect any delays, but if there are any problems, I doubt I'll be held up by more than a day at the very most.
Good, because a lot is riding on this deal. This is your chance to break into the market, Vez. Nothing can go wrong.
Marcella emphasized her point a couple more times before finally hanging up and leaving Vez free to begin his work. He rolled up his sleeves and checked his plans one last time. Nothing appeared out of place. He had the materials, the equipment, and the time he needed to bring his first Mech into existence. Before he started, he took a deep breath and adjusted his mental state. He didn't want to deliver an average product and call it a day. He wanted to wow the client, and the way to do that was by incorporating something unique into the Mech that only he could deliver. Even if most of the pilots of his Mechs couldn't articulate what the X factor was, it would still help to improve their impressions of his work. Vez approached the 3D printer with reverence. He loaded up the files for the valiant Marc Antony. From its vapor-generated crest to its sturdy, adorned tower shield, the Mech already radiated a sense of prowess in its appearance. Its entire purpose was to act as a vanguard, a breaker of blockades, and a workhorse that could take a beating for the team. Vez took inspiration from the mock-up and immersed himself into bringing the design to life. I'm not just building a Mech. I am bringing it to life. Saying it out loud mattered to Vez. It sounded nonsensical, But to someone who had had a glimpse of the incredible might of the X Factor, it was an important distinction that made all the difference to the end product. He was an artisan of mechs, not an industrialist who only cared about pumping out as many mechs as he could. To treat the mech as a living thing instead of a lifeless machine was the first step to realizing the X Factor. All right, I've got you fixed in my mind. He tapped the projection to separate the hologram into thousands of individual components. He started with the easiest but most important part, the internal frame. This was mechanically simple to produce, but it required highly consistent fabrication in order to ensure it lasted many years. Any hidden faults buried deep within its solid surface could lead to devastating consequences in the battlefield. The MTA had strict requirements for the integrity of the internal frame, so Vez could not afford to slack off when fabricating the seemingly simple alloy pieces. The 3D printer performed up to standard. Vez had already checked and calibrated all the important machines in his workshop long ago, but it was pleasing to see the machine slowly churn out piece after piece. Vez took particular care when producing the sockets and joints, which allowed the frame to move its limbs as naturally as a human being. Only a couple of minor deviances emerged during their production, a sign the printer's precision was off. This was a particularly fatal flaw when producing tiny components like processors. It was a good thing Vez had scheduled in an entire day for further calibrations. With his enhanced knowledge of the 3D printer's workings, he dug into the advanced programming of the machine and ran multiple tests and simulations. He narrowed down the source of the problem to a worn-down injector. Vez solved the problem by fabricating a replacement before opening the machine and replacing the component in question. There. Now it should work properly. The rest of the internal frame components were produced without a hitch. Night had already fallen, and Vez took a much-needed break. The next day, Vez devoted his attention to crafting the HRF armor plating. It took 3 days to process the raw materials into the required form. He had to aim for consistency and precision, because even 1% less of a certain metal added to a process could ruin the entire batch. Although most of the work was tedious and repetitive, his focus never wavered, and he was constantly on guard for any deviations from the norm. The process was a lengthy one and required him to refine tons and tons of worthless alloy material. This changed its structure into a new and slightly more valuable form. He then did the same thing with this new material, and the cycle was repeated up to 5 times. It took several days of refining and purifying, but eventually, the mixed alloy was transformed into smooth pieces of shaped armor plating. Vez knocked his knuckles against the surface of a thick chest plate. It rang with the delightful tone of a uniform piece of metal. He spent a lot of time individually fashioning these plates into the appropriate form to clad the Marc Antony's outer layer. They still looked grayish-brown, the standard color of HRF plating. He would add some color later. Over the next 2 days, he produced the remaining parts of the mech, the most important of which were the power reactor and the engines. His 3D printer had some trouble producing the more intricate sections, but Vez was able to combine his newly improved skills with his in-depth experience producing them on Iron Spirit to stave off any disasters. He placed most of his attention on the more challenging components, breezing by the easier ones but never failing to double-check their integrity. Phew, they look like they came out okay. But on closer inspection, he realized there were a couple of hidden faults in a few of the sections. They wouldn't wreck the mech immediately, but they would leave the machine vulnerable to a cascade of future malfunctions. Dealing with the suboptimal sections now would prevent the MTA from using them as a reason to disqualify his mech during their inspection. He decided to replace them entirely and fabricated replacements. After he had finished producing all the parts, he moved on to the assembly.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.